The NFL Combine is supposed to be controlled, polished, professional. It's where coaches talk about 40-yard dash times, arm length, and high motor prospects. It's football's version of a corporate networking event. But for Kevin Stefanski, it turned into something completely different. Instead of calm scouting discussions, the room filled with tension. Reporters didn't ask about draft boards. They went straight for the controversy. Questions about his NFLPA C- grade. Questions about locker room tension. Questions about the quarterback situation and the way Shedeur Sanders was handled. And suddenly the atmosphere changed. Stefanski tried to keep the standard coach speak going. Short answers, careful wording. That tight smile coaches use when they're trying to stay composed under pressure. But the questions kept coming, sharper every minute. Then the noise started building outside the room. Booing. Not the polite murmurs you hear at scouting events. Loud, sustained boos echoing through the combine halls. And in that moment, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a press conference. It was about a reputation unraveling in front of the entire NFL. The first question that hit Kevin Stefanski at the Combine wasn't about draft prospects. It was about a grade. Specifically, the NFLPA Player Survey, where Stefanski reportedly received a C-, the lowest grade among all 32 head coaches that season. Pasted text. In a league where coaches usually land somewhere in the middle of the pack, that result stood out immediately. Because these report cards aren't random polls. They come directly from players inside the building. Anonymous evaluations about communication, leadership, and overall culture. The people filling them out are the ones sitting in meetings every day, running drills, and living inside the locker room environment. So when a coach ends up at the very bottom of that list, people start asking questions. Now, a single grade doesn't automatically mean a coach failed. Losing seasons can sour moods. Frustrated players sometimes express that frustration in surveys. Context always matters in the NFL. But perception matters too. And the perception created by that C- grade was simple. Something inside the building wasn't working. Around the league, executives began connecting dots. Stefanski's Browns had struggled through stretches of inconsistency. The offense had looked rigid at times, and there were growing whispers that the relationship between coaching staff and players wasn't as smooth as it once appeared. Those whispers turned into louder conversations once the survey leaked. Because in a results-driven league like the NFL, respect inside the locker room is everything. Coaches can survive losing seasons if players believe in the direction. But if belief fades, everything becomes harder. Play calls get second-guessed. Press conferences feel defensive. And every decision starts getting analyzed under a microscope. That's exactly what happened to Stefanski. Suddenly, every move he made, every quarterback rotation, every game plan, every sideline interaction was being viewed through a new lens. But the C- grade wasn't the only reason critics started questioning his leadership. There was another storyline building at the same time. And it centered on one player who became the focal point of the entire debate, Shedeur Sanders. Sources: the conversation around Kevin Stefanski didn't stay focused on a report card for long. Very quickly, it shifted to a much bigger storyline, the handling of Shedeur Sanders. When Sanders arrived in Cleveland, expectations were already sky high. He carried the confidence, the spotlight, and the kind of personality that naturally draws attention in the NFL. Many analysts believed he had the traits to develop into a franchise quarterback. And early on, Stefanski publicly sounded supportive. He praised Sanders in interviews. He described him as someone who had the mindset and toughness required to succeed in the league. On the surface, it looked like a coach backing his young quarterback. But critics argue that what happened on Sundays didn't always match those words. Throughout the season, there were moments where the offensive approach appeared unusually cautious. Play calling often looked conservative, focusing on minimizing mistakes rather than unleashing Sanders' strengths, timing, quick reads, and confidence under pressure. Now, it's important to frame this correctly. There has been no official confirmation that Stefanski intentionally limited Sanders or lost confidence in him. Coaching decisions are complex, and game plans are influenced by dozens of factors: injuries, defensive matchups, protection concerns, and roster depth. But perception matters in the NFL. And the perception among some fans and analysts was that Sanders was being managed rather than empowered. That perception intensified during one particular moment late in the season, a play that many Browns fans still talk about today. A critical two-point conversion attempt. The kind of situation where franchises usually trust their starting quarterback with everything on the line. Instead, Sanders was taken off the field. To some observers, it looked like a creative tactical decision. Coaches sometimes use special packages in those moments, but to others, it felt symbolic, a signal that the coaching staff wasn't fully confident in the quarterback during the most important snap of the game. And that's when the conversation started to shift from strategy to trust. Because in the NFL, nothing shakes a locker room faster than uncertainty at the quarterback position. And once that perception starts spreading, it rarely stays quiet for long. If there was one moment that critics keep pointing back to, it's that two-point conversion. Late in the game, the Browns lined up with the season hanging in the balance. The offense had a chance to swing momentum with a single play. These are the moments where quarterbacks build reputations, where coaches usually hand the ball to their leader and say, "Go win this." But that's not what happened. Instead, Shedeur Sanders was pulled off the field for the two-point attempt. On paper, the decision could be explained as a tactical wrinkle. Coaches sometimes deploy specialized packages in high-leverage situations. A surprise look can catch a defense off guard. It happens across the league. But context is everything. When a team removes its starting quarterback in the most important moment of a game, the message can feel different. Fair or not, players begin reading between the lines. Receivers wonder why the ball isn't in their quarterback's hands. Offensive linemen notice the hesitation, and the quarterback himself feels the shift. In the NFL, trust between a coach and a quarterback is one of the most fragile relationships in sports. It's built through repetition and belief. When that trust appears uncertain, especially under the bright lights of a crucial play, the ripple effects can travel through the entire locker room. Again, none of this proves Stefanski intentionally lost confidence in Sanders. Coaches make difficult decisions every week, and hindsight often changes how those calls are viewed. But perception moves faster than explanation. Fans watching that play didn't see a clever strategy. They saw hesitation. And once that narrative formed, it started attaching itself to everything else happening around the team. Suddenly, the earlier whispers about locker room tension sounded louder. The NFLPA grade felt more significant, and every press conference answer began getting analyzed for hidden meaning. For Stefanski, that two-point decision became more than just a single play call. It became a symbol of the growing question hanging over the entire season. Did the coaching staff truly believe in their quarterback when it mattered most? Normally, NFL coaching changes follow a predictable rhythm. The season ends. Teams evaluate quietly behind closed doors. Then, on what the league calls Black Monday, several coaches are dismissed at the same time. It's almost procedural, part of the business cycle of the NFL. But Kevin Stefanski's exit from Cleveland didn't follow that script. It happened on a Thursday. 3 days before the Browns were scheduled to play their final game of the season. That timing alone raised eyebrows around the league. Owners rarely fire a head coach midweek unless something inside the organization has reached a breaking point. It disrupts preparation. It sends shockwaves through the locker room, and it signals that patience has officially run out. Reports suggested Browns owner Jimmy Haslam believed the situation inside the building had deteriorated too quickly to wait for the traditional end-of-season process. Again, no official statement claimed there was a single explosive incident that caused the move. But the combination of factors, the losing stretch, the quarterback controversy, and the growing questions about leadership, created a storm the organization apparently felt it had to address immediately. Because in the NFL, owners can tolerate losing seasons. What they struggle to tolerate is uncertainty around the future. When a franchise invests heavily in a young quarterback, that player becomes the centerpiece of long-term plans. If ownership begins to believe that relationship between coach and quarterback is unstable, the timeline for decisions can accelerate dramatically. That's what made Stefanski's firing feel different. It wasn't just about wins and losses. It looked like a franchise choosing its quarterback over its coach. And once Cleveland made that choice, the story didn't end there. Because the next chapter raised an even bigger question. If Stefanski had just lost his job under those circumstances, why was another team willing to give him the keys to their future so quickly? If Stefanski's midweek firing raised eyebrows, the next development added even more fuel to the conversation. The NFL Players Association released its annual team and coaching evaluations, a report built on anonymous feedback from players around the league. These surveys ask athletes to grade their organizations on leadership, communication, facilities, and overall culture. And according to the results referenced in the transcript, pasted text, Kevin Stefanski didn't just score poorly. He finished last among all 32 NFL head coaches, receiving a C- grade from his own roster. That detail mattered, because these surveys don't come from journalists or fans watching from the outside. They come from the people inside the building, the players who attend meetings, practice under the coaching staff, and experience the team environment every day. In most cases, even frustrated players tend to give moderate scores. Locker rooms understand the power dynamics of the league. Public criticism of a head coach can create unwanted attention. So when a coach lands at the very bottom of the list, analysts immediately start asking why. Some insiders suggested the grade reflected communication issues. Others pointed to frustration during a difficult season. And some critics argued that the ongoing quarterback uncertainty played a role in how players perceived leadership. Again, it's important to emphasize that these grades don't tell the entire story of a season. Anonymous surveys can reflect emotions from a losing stretch, and players sometimes judge situations differently than front offices do. But the optics were undeniable. At the very moment Stefanski was trying to defend his leadership publicly, a report surfaced suggesting that many of his own players were not fully convinced. That contrast made the narrative even more complicated. Because in the NFL, a coach's reputation isn't shaped only by strategy or play design. It's shaped by trust. Trust from players, trust from ownership, and trust from the locker room. When that trust begins to erode, whether through perception or reality, every decision a coach makes suddenly carries more weight, which made the next development in Stefanski's career even more surprising. Sources: after everything that happened in Cleveland, many people around the league assumed Kevin Stefanski would need time away from the spotlight. Coaches who exit under controversy often step back for a season. They join an advisory role, work as a coordinator, or spend a year rebuilding their reputation before returning to a head coaching position. But that's not what happened. Instead, the Atlanta Falcons decided to give Stefanski another opportunity, and not a small one. They handed him the responsibility of leading a team that believes it is on the verge of a new era. From the outside, that decision surprised a lot of observers, because Atlanta isn't a quiet rebuilding project. The Falcons have a young, dynamic roster filled with offensive talent. Michael Penix Jr., Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson represent a core that many analysts believe could become one of the most exciting offenses in the league. This isn't a team starting from scratch. It's a team trying to accelerate. And that's why the hire raised questions. The Falcons' locker room has developed a reputation for personality and strong leadership voices. Players there value authenticity, communication, and belief in the quarterback leading the offense. When a new coach arrives with a reputation shaped by controversy in another city, every move naturally gets examined more closely. Now, to be fair, Atlanta's front office clearly saw something they believed in. Coaches often learn from difficult experiences. The NFL is filled with examples of leaders who struggled in one organization before finding success somewhere else. A fresh start can reset relationships, expectations, and culture. That's the opportunity Stefanski now has. But he's not starting with a clean slate in the public eye. The NFLPA grade is still attached to his name. The Cleveland quarterback controversy is still discussed by analysts. And the moment he steps onto the Falcons' sideline, every decision involving his quarterback will be under a microscope. That's the reality of second chances in the NFL. They come with pressure, because now the question isn't just whether Kevin Stefanski can win games in Atlanta. It's whether he truly learned from what happened in Cleveland. When a coach arrives with baggage from a previous stop, the first few months become critical. Training camp practices, early press conferences, even small sideline interactions start carrying extra meaning. Fans, media, and players all begin watching closely to see if anything feels different from the past. That's exactly where Kevin Stefanski now finds himself in Atlanta. The Falcons are entering a season where expectations are quietly rising. With a young roster full of offensive talent, the organization believes it has the foundation to compete in the NFC South. But that foundation depends heavily on one thing: stability at quarterback. Michael Penix Jr. is expected to be the centerpiece of that plan. Young quarterbacks need more than just playbooks and practice reps. They need confidence from their coaching staff. They need to feel that when the biggest moments arrive, fourth downs, 2-minute drives, late game decisions, the coach standing on the sideline believes in them completely. If that connection exists, teams grow quickly. If it doesn't, things can unravel just as fast. That's why analysts across the league are paying attention to how Stefanski handles his quarterback from the very beginning of his Falcons tenure. Every play call, every comment in a press conference, and every critical in-game decision will be interpreted through the lens of what happened in Cleveland. Fair or unfair, that history now follows him. And the Falcons' locker room will form its own opinions quickly. NFL players don't wait an entire season to evaluate leadership. They notice patterns in training camp. They notice how coaches respond to mistakes. They notice whether the quarterback is empowered or protected. If Stefanski shows clear trust in Penix and builds an offense around his strengths, the narrative could change quickly. But if hesitation appears again in high-pressure moments, the reaction will be immediate. Because in today's NFL, reputations travel faster than ever. And right now, the entire league is watching to see which version of Kevin Stefanski shows up in Atlanta. Right now, Kevin Stefanski's story in the NFL sits in a strange place. Not finished, not fully rewritten, just pause between two very different chapters. In Cleveland, the narrative ended with tension. A season filled with questions about quarterback trust, locker room chemistry, and leadership decisions that fans still debate. The midweek firing, the NFLPA report card placing him at the bottom of the league, the public criticism that followed him all the way to the NFL Combine. Those moments shaped how the football world now views him. But the NFL has always been a league of second chances. Atlanta has given Stefanski an opportunity many coaches never receive, the chance to step into a new building and prove that the previous chapter doesn't define the entire story. Coaches have rebuilt their reputations before. Some of the league's most respected leaders once faced seasons that nearly ended their careers. The difference between redemption and repetition often comes down to one thing: adaptation. If Stefanski truly learned from the turbulence in Cleveland, if he empowers his quarterback, strengthens communication inside the locker room, and aligns the entire team behind one clear vision, this could become the chapter that changes everything. But if the same patterns appear again, if hesitation replaces confidence in the biggest moments, then the questions that followed him from Cleveland will only grow louder in Atlanta. And in the NFL, where every decision is replayed and analyzed in real time, those questions rarely disappear on their own. So the real story isn't about what happened at the Combine, or even what happened in Cleveland. The real story is what happens next.